Most men spend their entire lives trying to understand women. They read books, they watch videos, they listen to other people's advice, they memorize certain lines, they learn certain techniques, and then they wonder, why isn't anything working even after doing so much? But perhaps the problem is not that you have not learned enough. Perhaps the problem is that you were taught the wrong thing from the very beginning, because human attraction is not a machine into which you put the right words and get the desired result out. And Niccolò Machiavelli understood something about human nature centuries ago that most people still ignore today. People do not always value the thing they receive the most. Sometimes they realize its value when the possibility of losing it begins to appear. And this is the truth that many men understand only when it is already too late. They did not learn it from a book. They learned it when the woman they thought would never leave them actually walked away, when they watched her walk away, when they repeatedly read her last message, when they asked themselves, I did everything right, so why did she leave me? They gave attention, they cared, they were always available, they expressed their feelings, they tried to understand her every need, and yet she left. And that is where a different world of attraction opened up before them, one they had never seen before. A world where more effort does not always create more attraction. If you are also trying to understand how attraction actually works, then listen carefully. Because what is coming next may shake all the beliefs you have been told so far about relationships and attraction. The first truth. You do not create attraction, you reduce resistance. Most men see attraction as a construction project. They think, I'll give her a little more praise, I'll send a few more messages, I'll give her a nice gift, I'll always be available, I'll reveal my feelings completely, I'll solve every problem she has, and gradually she will become attracted to me. But the human mind does not work this way, because sometimes when you keep adding more and more, you are not increasing value, you are increasing pressure. You are giving attention, but the other person may feel it not as attention but as expectation. You are caring, but she may feel it as responsibility. You are always present, and gradually your presence becomes so ordinary that its special value is no longer felt. This is where the game of attraction can turn upside down, because sometimes attraction does not increase because of how much you give. Instead, it increases because of how much the other person thinks about you when you are not there. And this is where Machiavelli's psychology becomes interesting. What is always available is not missed. But this does not mean that you should deliberately ignore someone. It does not mean intentionally replying late or manipulating someone. No, the real point is much deeper. The real question is, does your own life continue even without that person? Because if your entire world revolves around that person, then no matter how hard you try to appear mysterious, your need will not remain hidden. Look at Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the most powerful men in history, a man whose orders moved armies, who won wars, who defeated kings, who changed the politics of Europe. But there was one place where all his power became weak. Josephine. There is a strange contradiction visible in the story of their relationship. The man before whom the entire world was bowing appeared emotionally vulnerable before one woman. There was restlessness in his letters, passion, an urgency to receive her attention. He waited for her response. Her distance troubled him. And the problem was not that Napoleon loved her. The problem was that gradually she became the center of his emotional world. She knew that he would come back. She knew how deep his attachment was. She knew that Napoleon would not easily leave her. And this is where a psychological shift begins, when a person becomes completely certain that this person will never leave me. Then the fear of losing them decreases. And when the fear of loss decreases, urgency can also decrease. Now think about it. If you knew that someone would return to you under every circumstance, would you worry about losing them in the same way? Probably not. This is the game of uncertainty, and the human mind both hates uncertainty and is attracted to it. Now look at the early days. When a new person enters your life, you do not know much about them. You do not know what they are thinking. You do not know how interested they are. You do not know what will happen next, and because of this, your mind thinks about them more. Every conversation feels interesting. You remember every small detail. Even a small message carries importance. But as certainty keeps increasing, mystery keeps decreasing. And when mystery disappears completely, excitement can also decrease. That is why attraction does not mean confusing someone. Instead, it means do not completely dissolve yourself into another person. Have your own world. Have your own purpose. Have your own ambitions. Have your own friends. Have your own principles. Have your own boundaries. Because a man who can live his life fully, even without a woman, is different from a man whose entire emotional stability is in the hands of that woman. Think about it. If your happiness depends on her message, then she is no longer just your partner. She has become your validation system. If she replies, you are happy. If she does not reply, you become anxious. If she praises you, your confidence increases. If she creates distance, your self-worth falls. Now the question is this love or dependence? And this is where most men deceive themselves. They say, I want her very much. But sometimes the real thing inside is, I need her so that I can feel good about myself. And when the responsibility for your happiness shifts onto another person, the relationship can gradually change from connection into pressure, because no one wants to feel, if I am not happy, then I am also responsible for carrying that burden. She wants to be a beautiful part of your life, not the entire burden of your life, and now comes the thing that many people misunderstand. Creating distance and manipulating someone are not the same thing. If you deliberately flirt with someone else to make her jealous, that is not power. If you deliberately take hours to reply so that the other person becomes anxious, that is not mystery. If you pretend to be cold, then you are still being controlled by that person's reaction, because your entire behavior is still revolving around that person. Real independence begins when you are not trying to ignore her. You are simply living your life. You have real work to do. You have real goals. You have real responsibilities. And if she is in your life, you welcome her. If she is not, your life still does not stop. This is the difference between desperation and desire. Because ultimately, the stronger man is not the one who does not need anyone. The stronger man is the one who can want someone, but does not lose himself without them. He can love, he can care, he can express his feelings, but he does not hand his entire identity over to another person. And perhaps this is the thing that can be best understood through Machiavelli's perspective. Do not place your power where its control is not in your hands. If your confidence depends on someone else's approval, then your power is in their hands. If your happiness depends on someone else's attention, then your emotional stability is in their hands. But the day you make yourself the center of your own life, the entire dynamic of the relationship changes. Now you do not go trying to prove, choose me. You also begin to see, do I want to choose you? And this is the moment where the psychology of attraction changes, because now you are not running to get someone. You are simply seeing whether that person deserves to create a beautiful place in the life that was already complete. And perhaps this is the very thing the other person notices first. But the story is not over yet. Because if staying busy in your own life can change attraction, then another, even deeper question arises. Why does a person think most about the person they cannot completely understand? And this leads us to the second truth of attraction. We are often drawn toward the very thing that the mind cannot completely resolve. But if you look carefully, then the story of attraction is not just about availability and absence, because there is another thing that can keep the human mind attached to a person: uncertainty. When we completely understand a person, our mind creates a picture of them. They are just like this. They will always react this way. They will always say this. I know what they will do next time. And the moment you have every answer about a person, you stop asking questions about them, and when the questions end, curiosity can also slowly disappear. This is where the second truth of attraction comes forward. The second truth: humans are not always attracted to clarity. Sometimes contradiction keeps them thinking for longer. Think about those men in history, about whom women continued to write, about whom they continued to think even after trying to forget them, from whom staying away might have been easier. Yet they kept returning to them again and again. What was it about them? Were they always the most handsome? Were they always the richest? Were they always perfect gentlemen? No. There was something else about them. They were not completely easy to understand. Look at Lord Byron, poet, lover, a rebellious personality, and a person whose personality was difficult to define in one word. He could be extremely romantic one moment, and extremely distant the next, sometimes deeply emotional, and sometimes completely cold. He would open his sensitivity before someone, and then suddenly pull himself back. There was a contradiction within him that could not easily be resolved. And the human mind is disturbed by unresolved things. If someone becomes completely understandable to you, your mind says, okay, I understand. But if the person in front of you possesses two different qualities at the same time, the mind stops. What is this person really? Do they care about me? If they do, then why are they so distant? If they are so confident, then why do they sometimes appear so vulnerable? And this is where a mental loop can begin. You may not be talking to the person, but your mind continues having a conversation about them. You may not be with them, but you keep replaying their behavior in your mind again and again. This is the real game of curiosity. Now look at Giacomo Casanova. History remembers him simply as a great seducer, but when you read about him, another thing comes forward. He was not just charming, he was also unpredictable, intellectual, but also careless, cultured, but also had a wildness within him. He could have a deep conversation about philosophy and ideas one moment, and the next moment leave for an entirely different adventure. His personality was not a straight line, and perhaps that is what made him memorable, because it was not easy to place him into a single category. You could not simply call him romantic, nor just wild, nor just intellectual, nor just careless. He was a combination of many contradictions, and this is the very thing that can make a person psychologically interesting. Now here, most men make a very big mistake. They think that to become attractive, they need to be completely predictable and safe. Always be polite, always agree, always be available, always say what the other person wants to hear, never show a strong opinion, never disagree, never show your weakness. And gradually, they begin hiding all those parts of their personality that they think the other person may not like. They polish themselves so much that in the end, there is almost nothing left of their personality. A version that does not upset anyone, but is not remembered by anyone either. And this is the difference between being a good person and being an interesting person. Because attraction does not always operate through logic. You can logically say about a person, this is a very good person. But simply being good and being emotionally compelling are not the same thing. You may feel respect for someone, but curiosity is a different thing. And curiosity arises when there is something in front of your mind that it cannot completely categorize. Think about it. If you already knew what a person would say in every situation, would your mind need to keep thinking about them constantly? Probably not. But if that person is sometimes very serious, and sometimes playful, sometimes extremely confident, and sometimes openly says, yes, I am also unsure about this, sometimes takes leadership, and sometimes gives someone else the spotlight, then your mind cannot put them into a single box, and this is where interest can emerge. But here there is a very important difference. Contradiction and fake mystery are not the same thing. If you deliberately start becoming cold, deliberately disappear, deliberately send mixed signals, give a lot of attention sometimes, and then suddenly ignore, then you are not becoming mysterious. You are simply creating a pattern, and patterns are quickly understood. If the other person realizes within a few days that this man is deliberately doing this so that I keep thinking about him, then the entire effect disappears, because mystery does not come from acting. Mystery comes from a person who is difficult to define with a single label. And that is the real point. You do not need to become mysterious. You simply need to stop making your personality smaller. Why do most men not do this? Because they are afraid of rejection. They are afraid that if they express their real opinion, the other person will judge them. If they show their ambition, they will seem arrogant. If they show their vulnerability, they will seem weak. If they passionately like something, they will seem strange. So they keep cutting away every edge of their personality. Whatever is a little too much, they hide it. Whatever is a little different, they suppress it. Whatever is a little intense, they control it. And in the end, aversion remains. That is completely acceptable, but not completely memorable. So do not run away from your contradictions. If you are ambitious, then remain ambitious. But do not be afraid to accept that sometimes you also feel uncertainty. Remain confident, but also learn to laugh at yourself. Remain strong, but do not consider your sensitivity a weakness. If you like logic, and that is fine, but if you are also influenced by art, music, or beauty, there is no need to hide it. You are disciplined, but sometimes you like being spontaneous. There is no contradiction in that either, because a human being is not a one-dimensional character. Depth always comes from layers, and layers become visible only when you do not confine yourself to a single image. This is why perhaps you now understand why we said in the previous part, do not make her your entire world. Because when a person's entire identity becomes just the relationship, all the other dimensions of their personality gradually begin to disappear. Every conversation is about the relationship. Every decision is made according to the relationship. Their mood is determined by the relationship. And in the end, they become less of a person and more of an emotional dependency. But a person who has their own world has more than just one personality to show. They have experiences, ideas, passions, failures, ambitions, fears, and contradictions. This is what gives a person depth. But now we are reaching the point where this entire story becomes even more uncomfortable. Because if mystery can create curiosity, then does that mean you should deliberately make yourself a little difficult? Can a little rejection increase attraction? Is it necessary for someone to lose you first before they understand your value? And the most dangerous question, is there a boundary between attraction and rejection that is much smaller than you think, after crossing which curiosity can turn into obsession? This leads us to the next and most uncomfortable truth. The third truth. The distance between attraction and hatred can be much smaller than you think. But now the question is, where exactly is the boundary where attraction ends and turns into contempt? And this is where most modern relationship advice completely fails. From childhood, you are told the same kinds of things. Be kind, be understanding, be patient in every situation. Understand her mistakes, don't judge her behavior. Never make the situation worse. And if she does something you don't like, tolerate it anyway. Because if you set boundaries, maybe she will distance herself from you. It all sounds very good, very mature, very civilized, but there is one problem. Kindness and weakness are not the same thing. And this is the difference many men never learn, because when there is no strength behind kindness, the other person may not always see your kindness as kindness. Sometimes they may see it as a signal. This person is so afraid of losing me that no matter what I do, he will stay here. And this is where the balance of attraction can begin to change. The third truth. Without respect, attraction cannot last for very long. You can love someone, do anything for them, forgive every mistake they make. But if in this entire process you lose yourself, then in trying to save the relationship, you may lose the very thing the relationship needed most, respect. Because endless tolerance is not always proof of strength. Sometimes it can also become a sign of a lack of self-respect. Think about it. If someone repeatedly crosses your boundary, and every time you say, it's okay, then the same thing happens again. All right, I'll let it go this time too. Then a third time. I love her so much. And slowly, a pattern develops. The other person learns. You have no real boundary. You say one thing but do another. You say, I will not accept this. But when she does the same thing again, you are still standing there. And this is where the value of words begins to disappear. Because a boundary is not what you say. A boundary is what you are willing to enforce when necessary. Look at Peter Abelard and Heloise. Peter Abelard was one of the greatest philosophers of his time. His intelligence was extraordinary, but their story was not simply a love story. It was the story of two people, between whom there was not only attraction, but also intellectual respect. Heloise herself was an extremely talented and scholarly woman. She did not just love Abelard. She also respected him. And this difference is very important, because having feelings for someone is one thing, and respecting their character is another. Respect often develops where the other person has their own principles, their own way of thinking, their own direction, their own purpose. A life that does not end once the relationship begins. Abelard was not changing his entire identity simply to make her happy. He had his own intellectual world, his own purpose, his own beliefs, and this is what prevents a relationship from becoming nothing more than emotional dependence. Now look at another powerful woman in history. Catherine the Great. One of the most influential women in history. Many men entered her life, but the interesting thing is that the people around power were not always the ones she was most influenced by. Often respect was created for those who did not simply bow before her power, those who had their own opinions, those who were not afraid of disagreement, those who did not say yes to everything simply to gain approval. Why? Because maintaining your identity in front of a powerful person is a signal in itself. I have my own world too. And this is something modern dating advice often misunderstands. It thinks, if I always agree, she will like me. If I make her happy every time, the relationship will become stronger. But not every disagreement in a relationship is a threat. Sometimes disagreement shows that the other person actually thinks, and now we come to an uncomfortable point. Do women test men? Yes, but it would be wrong to understand this as some conspiracy or deliberate mind game. Humans generally observe another person's reliability and boundaries. Sometimes someone pushes a little. Sometimes they observe your reaction. Sometimes they disagree. Sometimes they pull away. Sometimes they come close to your boundary. And often this does not happen as part of some planned strategy. It is human behavior. People want to know, what is this person really like? Will he lose his balance under pressure? Will he break down over everything? Will he change his opinion just to make me happy? Can he say no? Can he protect his dignity? Does he have a real boundary? And if the answer is no every time, then slowly a perception can develop that this person is so afraid of losing me that he will tolerate anything. And this is where the biggest danger lies. Because a person who has no boundaries can slowly become more of a yeast resource than a partner, always available, always supportive, always agreeing, always forgiving, always coming back. Useful? Maybe. Comforting? Absolutely. But is simply being useful a guarantee of attraction? No. Because attraction does not depend only on how much you do for someone, it can also depend on who you are. But understand this carefully. This absolutely does not mean that you should become harsh, arrogant, or controlling. This is not an invitation to control your partner, to turn every disagreement into an ego battle, to use every boundary as a threat, or to talk about ending the relationship over every small mistake. That is not strength, it can be another form of insecurity. Real strength is calm. It does not need to prove itself all the time. A strong person can say, I love you, but I cannot accept this behavior. He can say it without shouting. He can say it without threats. He can say it without insulting. And if that same boundary is repeatedly broken, he can turn his words into action. That is a boundary. Men who learn this lesson often do not learn it from books. They learn it the hard way. First, they give everything. Then they give a little more. Then they put their own needs aside. Then they distance themselves from their friends. Then they change their priorities. Then they justify every mistake the other person makes. Then they ignore disrespect by saying, she was just in a bad mood. They accept dishonesty by saying, there must be a reason. They interpret manipulation as, "She loves me so much." And every time they tell themselves, "I'll just understand a little more. Everything will be fine." But one day they realize that person is no longer as attracted to them as before. She is becoming distant. The warmth in the conversations has decreased. The respect has decreased. And the most painful part, the very person they changed themselves so much for, no longer looks at them in the same way. Then the question comes, I did everything. So why did this still happen? And perhaps the answer is this: because you gave her everything, but lost yourself along the way. She was not looking for someone who would simply fulfill every one of her needs. She may want to be with someone who also has their own direction, who has their own boundaries, who has their own life, who is kind but not so desperate that he accepts disrespect, who can love but does not love by hating himself, who can compromise but not at the cost of his identity, and most importantly, who does not sell his dignity out of fear of losing someone. Because this is very important to understand. The greater the fear of losing someone becomes, the more a person begins tolerating the wrong things, and the more they tolerate, the more they put themselves in a weaker position. So what does this practically mean? Should you learn tricks to gain attraction? No. Should you deliberately stay distant? No. Should you become cold? No. Should you control a woman? Absolutely not. So what should you do? Build your life. A life that does not depend on the approval of a relationship. Pursue your goals, develop your skills, work on your body and mind, strengthen your financial and emotional independence, keep your friends, keep your interests, and build a world where if a woman enters your life, she makes your life better. But before she arrived, your life was not empty, because when someone enters your world, they should feel that they are not there to fill an empty space. They are becoming part of a world that already exists. And that difference is huge, and do not hide the other parts of your personality either. Do not limit yourself to one dimension just to appear like the good guy. Stay ambitious, but do not be afraid to accept your uncertainty. Stay confident, but do not forget to laugh at yourself. Stay strong, but do not consider being sensitive a weakness. Stay serious, but also be playful. Have your own opinions, but also have the ability to listen to the opinions of others. Because the previous truth tells us exactly this. Contradiction gives personality depth. And now this third truth connects to it. Boundaries give personality a backbone. A personality without a backbone, no matter how charming it may be, can be difficult to sustain for long. And stop tolerating disrespect, not out of anger, not out of ego, not for revenge. For self-respect. If someone makes a mistake once, talk about it. If they do it again, make the boundary clear. If the same pattern continues repeatedly, consider your actions, because a boundary does not mean, you cannot do this. A boundary means, if this continues, I will not remain in this situation. This is not control. This is self-respect, and understanding the difference between the two is extremely important. Because in the end, attraction is not a court of justice. It does not always reward the person who gives the most. It does not always choose the person who sacrifices the most. And it does not always choose the person trying hardest to be the best. But one thing almost always matters: how you see yourself. If you place no value on your own dignity, letting someone else determine its value can be dangerous. If your entire identity is built around another person's approval, your position within the relationship can become weak. But if you have your own life, your own depth, your own boundaries, and you can love someone without needing to lose yourself, the dynamic changes. Now you are not chasing someone, you're not trying to hold on to someone. You are simply asking, is this person right to become part of my world? And perhaps this is the biggest power shift. Because in the end, real attraction is not created by some trick. It comes from a person who is comfortable with himself, who does not constantly need validation, who can give direction to his life, who can love, but can also walk away when necessary? Who is kind, but not at the cost of his dignity? Who is strong, but is not ashamed of his vulnerability? Who is confident, but not arrogant? And who does not make a woman the center of his life, but gives her a meaningful place within his life? That is the difference between a needy man and a grounded man. And perhaps this is why some men are difficult to forget. Not because they were perfect, but because they did not hide every part of themselves. They had their own world, they had their own boundaries, they had their own identity, and most importantly, they were not willing to lose themselves for someone's love. But now one final question remains. If independence is necessary for attraction, if mystery creates curiosity, and if boundaries create respect, then what is the thing that connects all three together? Is it confidence? Is it power? Or is there some deeper psychological force working behind all of this? Because the next truth may be the most uncomfortable part of the entire story. When do people begin to value someone the most? When they realize for the first time that they could lose them. And this is where the story takes another dangerous turn.